aspects of these paradoxes in my own ministry. And I think that my sector does not have an easy answer. It is struggling with it on its own. Whether, I mean, in the days when we had when de Klerk decided to change the direction of the country, he is believed to have called, I won't say for sure because I wasn't there, to have called a meeting with the leaders of the Dutch Reformed Church that had promoted the theology that justifies apartheid, and to have said, we need to make a change here, so I will need you to help me communicate this. It's going to be at odds with everything we've said in the past, was the faith. And so how are we going to get about this? De Klerk made a call for a united Christian witness, a very strange thing to come from the head of an apartheid state, when the Christian witness had always been against apartheid, but he called for a united Christian witness. And we at the South African Council of Churches were supposed to respond to this. It was in the days when Frank Chikane was the General Secretary. So we sat down and said, how are we going to respond to this? You can't say no to a united Christian witness, but where does de Klerk come from, saying we must have a united Christian witness? And so we responded, yes, to a Christian witness that's united, but we're not going to be called by the state to such. If the Dutch Reformed Church would like to come back to the fold, they're welcome, but we're not going to be invited by de Klerk to go to one such. And by this time, de Klerk had already convened, called a meeting, established an office in the presidency for this united Christian witness, and appointed Professor Lou Alberts, I think that his name was, to chair this. And we said, no. So he quickly said, all right, I get out of it. I'm closing the office, but still had his Lou Alberts. And so we had to deal with that. What did we do? We then said, all right, maybe if we insist on a co-chairing with our own General Secretary, Frank Chikane, they might say no. And they said, fine. I thought, we'll make an even more difficult demand. We'll say the secretary for this must come from the World Council of Churches, the program to combat racism, which was the one thing that the government didn't like. And this was Bani Pikiana. And they said, okay, how soon can he come? So we had what was called the Rustenburg Conference. I'm going to this because in that conference, we had a whole delegation, particularly of the Dutch Reformed Church, which at the time was finding it very difficult to tell its people that apartheid is sinful and heretical. And we were saying we can only go on the basis that we accept that sinfulness. Then we can have a united Christian witness. In the end, the statement that was accepted was not going to work for the Dutch Reformed Church. Even as it was being pronounced, they were outside having a press statement to dissociate from the aspect that says apartheid is a sin. When I sat down with Professor Johan Haynes to get a good understanding, I mean, when you talk to them, they seem to understand what we're talking about, but somehow they can't get it out there. He said, you have to understand that we are leaders of a church that has for generations made people believe that this is the normal way to be Christian. And you've got law-abiding, God-fearing people in the farm areas of this country who cannot just have their leaders announcing now that you've all been sinners all these years. It just doesn't, it does not make sense. And therefore, you've got to accept that there is a process that we have to undergo. And he committed to that process. And of course, he got killed for it. He got shot because he was promoting what people believed was the wrong message. And I suspect that there will always be these tensions about any change in attitudes over any matter. The question gets to be, what do you do about the human rights of people whose rights are undermined in the process while people are dealing with themselves in these processes? And that's a matter of a pastoral challenge that remains for all of us. There was a time when it was believed that if you don't shambok your workers, you don't love them. If you don't beat up your wife, you don't like her. And that happened a lot. And people, actually some women believed that, if he beats me up, it's because he loves me. And of course, no woman would want to accept that today. And even the farmer in the Free State who shamboked his workers and believed that he was doing the right thing because they love it when he shambokes them, that way he honors them. No, they won't do that today. So it is a matter of time, but that time is costly in terms of the rights of those that have to live with it.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to the second question, I'd like to give colleagues space to engage. 2 comments or questions. Mikes, are you ready? In terms of what has been said so far. Any comments? I've got to change glasses. One's short distance and one's long distance. So somebody may have their hand up and I may not see. Right.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Kat Kaikolkes from Botswana. This question, I think, would go to the Reverend, yes? How, in terms of transgender issues, the Bible is, gender binary space, right? A man must, a woman must. How do you feel the church or the religious bodies can start to muddle the language where we are doing it so on the ground to say, non-conforming? Do you think, how do you want us to help you bring the language that we use into the church? I think is the basic question.
That's the second question. So can we hold that? Could I have another comment, please? And Bishop, if you'll just remember that. We'll start with you and we go back. In other words, the same question is going to be posed to everybody up here. Anything else in terms of what has already been said? Right? There's a mic coming.
Patricia Watson from the Other Foundation. I'd like to ask the Bishop what would you recommend to the LGBTI community in terms of advancing their liberation in Africa?
Okay, Bishop.
Once upon a time, we organized blacks in South Africa to campaign for their freedom. And we said to our good white friends, please stand back. And they said we're being racist. We said, no, we cannot have a situation where white people are oppressing us and white people are telling us how to respond to the oppression. And when we say we would like to think about this by ourselves, they say you're being racist. That led to what was called black consciousness in South Africa. And in essence, what we were saying is that through non-racialism can only be when A, blacks take themselves seriously as of equal value to white people in South Africa. And when whites accept that they're not superior human beings. And that will happen because black people are making that statement loud and clear without having to kowtow to white interests. This comes at a time when some of us had been conditioned to never walk against white people in a pavement. When they come, you must step aside so that they can come through. And that was the culture of our time. And black consciousness led to black theology. Black theology was an interpretation of the gospel from the perspective of black experience. And again, one would say theology should be non-racial. It cannot be because it has to be experiential. It is based on one's experience of oneself in life in the context of the divine. When that developed, what was called those days feminist theology, one of the best scholars of that is a woman called Rosemary Ruther, who wrote a book called Feminism and God Talk. And Ruther would make the case that women have got to take the cudgels themselves and not have depend on women, on men, to try and interpret what it means to be a full human being as a woman. And she then said that very often you find when you start talking about this amongst men, the first reaction is to giggle. Kind of like an uncomfortable giggle.
Yeah.
And of course, that giggle is going to go, yeah, of course, I understand, I'm with you. But there's always a subliminal, but come on, I mean, you know, I'm a man, you're a woman. And that you get to a point where the men have to actually